Hello, everybody. I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. And so I'm doing another Dave Barry book, which you can probably tell from this picture of the cover that I took. It's a relatively well-used book. See, I once used it as a coaster. You can see right there the spot where I think it was tea that I put on it. Anyways. So Dave Barry is from Mars and Venus. This is one of his collections of various articles that he did over the years. Um, and I've said it before that there are really three distinct kinds of books that he's published. There's his novels, there are his books that follow a theme, and then there are his collections. Intriguingly enough, actually, Dave Barry's Guide to Guys, oddly, you can find somewhere in here, and I don't remember which one it is, but the article that he wrote that kind of is the basis or the initial basis of his his Dave Barry's Guide to Guys. You can find that in this particular book, and it's interesting just to see these first looks into the actual complete books that he wrote. Now, the thing about this one is I'm not sure that there's so much to say about it, but I was in a time crunch and this came to hand, so this is the book that I'm talking about because I read it and I liked it. It meets both of my requirements. Also, there are pictures in this. I don't have access to a scanner at the moment, so I didn't include those pictures, but they're actually just old pictures of Dave Barry as a kid, with humorous commentary beneath them, like the very first photo, which he says is from around 1952, shows me left with my sister Kate on a tricycle outside the house where we grew up in Armonk, New York. Between me and Kate as a child, I do not recognize, so I'm just going to say it's Bill Clinton, and if he wants to deny it, let him sue. So he does a foreword in which he complains about titling the book and how the initial titles he wanted to do had been were forbidden by the publisher, and how he vetoed titles the publisher wanted him to do, and pictures that people want to take of him because that's how they do, because that's how photographers work. He actually has a picture at the back where he says this is a publicity photo taken by a professional photographer. Professional photographers always make me do wacky stuff like get into a cold pool, which I hate, with a cigar, which I hate. This shows everybody how wacky I am. It's undignified and demeaning, but I do it because the only other option would be to get a real job. And I will respond to this by saying yes, of course, being a writer is a real job, but as one of the masses of people who have an actual real job, I don't believe you have a real job until you have to get up every day to do something you hate in exchange for money. If you are one of those lucky people, you just are somebody who doesn't have the common decency to get a job that makes you miserable like the rest of us, and you should be ashamed of yourself. Make of that what you will, of course. So, you have stories about the time that he and one of his fellow journalists decided to take on a challenge that the U.S. synchronized swimming team put on, which is, if you want to make fun of us, get in the pool and try to do this. Intriguingly, that reminds me very much of the ongoing debates that dancers have, the constant dancer thing of saying, of complaining when people say, "Oh, what you do is easy and you don't, and you're not real athletes." And I wonder sometimes how often dancers actually hear this, and how much of it is they've developed a culture around believing that everybody tells them this. I wonder about it. Um, in no small part, of course, because having not been a professional dancer ever, or even a like amateur dancer good enough for this to come up, it could just be that I've never run into that particular prejudice. But um, it does always intrigue me because dancers are not, in fact, athletes. They are certainly people who are as fit as athletes, and if you are strictly defining athlete as meaning a person who puts in a tremendously difficult physical effort in order to perform a series of activities, more or less professionally, then you can argue that they're athletes. But I tend to define athletics as being related to sports. And so there's a part of me that says maybe we should have a slightly different term because, of course, ballet is not a sport. Ballet is an art. And while it is certainly as difficult as, you know, as professional sports are, it's not a sport. It is definably an art. And while I'm not saying it's easier, I'm saying it is equally as hard. Um, we need to perhaps draw the line in terms of terminology, but then again, I tend to have a lot of lines drawn in terms of terminology that I think should be drawn. He does. He includes a couple of articles on the outcomes of him playing laser tag, which I remember laser tag. I remember when laser tag got big. I don't know how big laser tag is now. I participated in QZAR once. I don't remember how I wound up there. I just remember that there was some thing or other I was involved in where I wound up in laser tag. Um, which is kind of like paintball, only you don't get hurt unless you do something sincerely stupid. Whereas paintball, as Daria once said, those paintball things hurt. So really, I don't get paintball. He also, this is one of the books where he sticks very strictly to comedy. I've mentioned at times some of his books, some of his articles, he will he will go into serious places. He will talk seriously. This is one of the ones where he doesn't, where this just sticks to humor. Um, and I mean, I certainly enjoy that because he is a humor columnist. So, humor columns, it's where we go. But it does mean that we're lacking a little bit in terms of cohesiveness in this book. It feels a little bit too much like I don't know, like it's lacking some kind of a consistent line. And also, while this is very funny, I think it's not quite as funny as some of his other collections. But the thing that I did notice separately is as I've gotten older, as I've become more politically aware, not politically active, God no, never. As I've gotten older, I've started to notice some very, very sharp humor, some very pointed humor, some occasionally quite angry humor that you sometimes find in this that you don't necessarily notice as a kid because you're caught up in the goofiness, because you're caught up in how funny it is listening to him complain that lobsters are, you know, have all the classic biological characteristics of an insect, namely 1, it has way more legs than necessary, 2, there is no way you would ever pet it, 3, it does not respond to simple commands such as here, boy. I want to state for the record that cats do not respond to simple commands, and there are some cats that in no way would you ever try to pet them because cats are evil. Now, that's why I like cats. I think cats being evil is fundamental to the nature of the feline, and anybody who disagrees with me is just wrong because they are clearly a dog person and should be ashamed of themselves. I think there are a lot of people who should be ashamed of a lot of things, and I realize it's ironic, my claiming to be a cat person when I don't own cats and am, in fact, allergic enough to them that it would be way more work than it was worth to have a cat. But nonetheless, I'm just saying, saying that something doesn't respond to calling here boy, given that some dogs don't respond to that, is perhaps not the best qualifier. Just a word of advice, Dave. Anyways, he refuses to eat lobster because he thinks of them as giant insects, when, of course, as we all know, they are in fact more closely related to spiders, which is totally different from insects, right? Spiders, completely different. Totally. We're agreed on that. Well, actually, they're most closely related to scorpions, I think, which, again, totally different from insects, right? I speak as somebody who says the colloquial term bugs needs to, that people need to be very careful, again, terminologically speaking, about not freaking out that you just called that spider a bug and it is not an insect, to which I say, yes, I called it a bug, not an insect. Also, while he does have a picture in here of himself performing with the Lawn Rangers, the world-famous precision lawnmower and broom drill team, oddly enough, he does not in fact include the article about the Arcola, Illinois Broom Corn Festival and Lawn Rangers. I do think that that is an excellent article, but since it's not in this book, you can probably just, not worry about it. He talks about his childhood and watching baseball and participating in baseball, and a lot of these kind of bounce around temporally, but the one thing in this book is that, first of all, it was published in 1997, so again, there is, as in Dave Barry's Guide to Guys, there are a couple of jokes in here that in the post-9/11 world may seem outre, but as ever, I always think that people need to place things in their time and in their moment. And if you don't do that, you will find yourself not appreciating something as much as it should be. And the thing is that a lot of these have been published between 1990 and, say, 1997. This particular edition goes to October 98 for its publication, but the initial publication of this collection is 97, so, I mean, officially it's... officially that this is, nothing in it from before 1997. Now, I was saying anger, and there's a lot of anger to be found in his article, The Name Game, in which he complains bitterly about the Philip Morris cigarette company using the name Dave, his name, for a brand of cigarettes. And I would read you excerpts from it, but I now have far less than 10 seconds to wrap this up. So that'll be everything, and thank you for listening, anyone who's actually listening, and I'll see you all next week.